Chapter 3, Two of Swords. Okay, I'm intrigued. I was sitting on Quill's sofa staring at a small wooden box with carved sides on the glass table in front of me. My eyes traced its contours, trying to remember them all. After a moment, I took a breath and let my eyes flutter shut as I tried to keep a firm image of the box in my mind. Girl, you trainin'? I visualized my Sai, a cloud of colorless, smoky light. Man, she's going far by herself, okay. Focusing, I threaded small filaments of that colorless Sai energy around the box as I lifted it to my hand, then began to spin it in midair right above my palm. When I opened my eyes, I could still see the Sai winding tight around the box as I sped it up and slowed it down. And this time I didn't lose focus and make it shoot across the room, which was progress from my last attempt. A good thing, too, because if I put a hole in Quill's window like I nearly did earlier, he would definitely strangle me when he got back. I slowed the box to a near stop and plucked it from the air. It was getting easier to manage more precise control of my ability. At first, I'd had only a general sense of how to do big things, but even with these small exercises, I was improving at finer control. Though picking up a small box with my mind was not quite an impressive accomplishment. But it was homework from Ripley to practice. Oh, Ripley gave you homework, okay. She had reached out after my last checkup with a litany of small tasks she wanted me to practice and master. And she forbade me from doing anything else until I could utilize Psi on command and in a very precise way. Because F-class Espers were so controlled by emotion, and given the state I'd been in when I arrived, she came up with a quick and dirty training program to help avoid a repeat on the off chance I happened to be upset at something. Which was fair. I could see how they'd want me to at least be able to do that much before unleashing me on their city. Though I was also under orders to stop at the first sign of a headache and not practice for more than an hour at a time. At least for now. Though without Quill here, there's nothing to stop me from doing the latter. Morgan. Not that I wanted to. It wasn't like box lifting was all that entertaining. I let out a sigh and flopped against the back of the sofa. It was nice to have some peace from Quill standing over my shoulder and reminding me to not overdo it. He had stepped out earlier for an errand, so I had the flat to myself for a bit, and I was using that time to work on my homework. I wonder if there's some kind of practical guide to using Psi. I doubted it, but it would be nice to have some kind of actual guidance instead of working on my own. I had no idea if I was progressing well or not, or what progressing well even looked like. Pushing the thought away, I stood and stretched, rolling my shoulders and sighing at the small pops that creaked down my spine. Time for a break. I'd been at it for almost an hour anyway. Maybe some tea would be nice? I was heading into the kitchen to put water on when a soft knock sounded from the front of Quill's flat. I froze and looked toward the front entrance. The knock sounded again, and, wary of the unexpected visitor, I quietly went to check the security view screen. Quill hadn't had a single visitor since my arrival, so something felt off about him getting one when I was home alone. I was half expecting to see Endgame uniforms standing there. But no, it was an unfamiliar man with obvious cybernetic implants along his neck and jaw, a sure sign he was from Nysa. Should I answer? I was hesitant since I didn't know him, but maybe he was a neighbor. After a brief internal debate, I pulled the door open, peering out through a narrow crack. But I kept my foot placed securely against the bottom, just in case. Oh, hello. Yes? For a moment, the man stared, his expression going surprised before the slight smile settled over his features.
Hi there. You must be Morgan. Is Quill here right now?
He's not. How did you know my name?
I'm Locke, a colleague of Quill's. And he's mentioned you to me, that's all. I was supposed to be stopping by in about an hour, but my schedule changed, so I'm a little early. Do you know when he'll be back?
I'm sorry to say that I don't.
Oh. Do you happen to know where he went then?
Also no. He didn't say anything before he left, just that he had an errand and that he'd be back in a while.
he left you here with no word on when he'd be back and no idea where he even went?
He did.
Do you even have a way to contact him?
Nope.
I apologize on his behalf. I swear he has no manners sometimes.
You won't get a denial from me there.
In that case, is it alright if I come in and wait? He said he'd be back soon, yeah?
Yeah, we're not the confident sort. I mean, I love your design, bro, but... You said you were one of his colleagues?
I am, yes.
So this man was an editor? Or maybe a writer? Maybe this was the person whose work Quill edited. Maybe he was Quill's editor. He didn't look like any of the above, honestly. Though I couldn't say what I expected a writer to look like. A grumpy man ranting about adverbs, I guess.
I assume Quill never mentioned that someone would be coming by.
No, he didn't. He doesn't tend to share much information about himself unless I directly ask.
That seems about right. He has a tendency to assume people will just somehow infer it all on their own.
You sound like you know him pretty well.
I do. He and I have known each other a long time.
We stood without speaking for a moment as I hedged about inviting him in, and he waited patiently for me to open the door. Finally, his curious expression diffused into a slightly amused smile.
Miss Leone, I don't mean to be blunt. But if I was someone you had to be suspicious of, I'd already be in the apartment and doing whatever it is you're worried about me doing. That said, surely I don't look like someone who is here to round up unregistered Espers, do I?
You know a lot about her. I mean, okay, he did say that he knew her name because him and Quill are quote-unquote colleagues. Quill seems to have told him quite a bit about her being an unregistered Esper and everything too, so... I mean, I guess I can believe Quill told him that. I let out a soft breath. He didn't, of course. He looked like, well, a Nysian. But I'd learned the hard way that people who tried to grab you and carry you off didn't always look like the sort of people who would grab you and try to carry you off. Still, I suppose it was rude to leave him in the hall. And this wasn't even my flat. I stepped back to let him in, keeping out of arm's reach almost without thinking about it. I had been practicing with my Psi, though I was still very much a beginner. With that in mind, I suspected I could at least toss him across the room and run if he tried anything. Not that I thought he would exactly. But after what had happened before, I didn't want to assume someone was what they appeared. I wanted to be more cautious from now on, that was all. Getting too confident in the safety of where I lived was what made me so vulnerable before. Locke must have noticed that I kept my distance because he paused right inside.
Morgan, I'm aware you had a hard time of things before you came here. I'm sorry if my showing up has you worried. I really wish Quill had told you I'd be coming.
As he came further inside, Locke shrugged out of his jacket and laid it over an arm, smiling at me over his shoulder as he went past me into the sofa.
I haven't heard your entire story, but Quill shared the broad details with me, and from what I've heard, I can understand why you'd be careful about unfamiliar people.
Sorry.
Don't be sorry, Morgan. A lot of people here have similar stories. Maybe not as unpleasant as yours, but pretty close. Even my assistant, actually. I doubt Quill has mentioned anything about them, but they're also an Esper. Not a queen rank like you, but an F-class bishop.
Interesting. A bishop? A named rank, and F-class at that. Fairy Espers were still uncommon, but it did seem like they'd be more likely to end up here than others, if only because they more easily escaped early detection. I trailed after Locke, but stayed to one side of the sofa and away from where he was leaning against its back.
Anyway, Vale actually was hoping to meet you at some point if you choose to stay. They have a lot of sympathy for your situation, and, well, there aren't a lot of humans in this sector.
How many people know about me exactly?
Oh, I imagine it's just me, Vale, Ripley, and Quill. To be honest, Quill hasn't been forthcoming with information, but He was suddenly unavailable for meetings and calls for a few days, which is pretty unusual for him. He couldn't hide that something was going on. Vale happened to be in the room when he and I talked, so that's how they found out. Quill isn't going around bragging about the queen rank he found, if that was your concern.
I didn't assume he was bragging about it. It makes me nervous to not know who he's told. I was technically on the run, after all. I couldn't let the fact this place was comfortable make me forget that. Quiet anxiety was swirling in my stomach as I flopped onto a chair. The level of apprehension I was feeling from hearing that someone knew my name was ridiculous. It's not as if I've sworn him to secrecy. I don't even know what I'm worried about anymore these days. I guess I'm still a little on edge. More than I'd realized. Locke came around the edge of the sofa and sat on the end closest to me, giving me a concerned look.
Would you like to meet Vale, Morgan? They might be able to talk you through some of this. Or at least share the perspective of someone who arrived under somewhat similar circumstances and came out the other side. Like I said, they're not a queen rank like you, but they've been in a very similar situation to the one you find yourself in now. They've mentioned that they'd like to help you. If you need it. Or want it.
Help me? Why? They don't even know me.
I think you'll like them. Though being fair, it's hard not to.
I'll think about it. If I can be completely honest, it's a little difficult to get used to people wanting to help me so freely. Quill, Ripley, now another person I've never even met? I'm not ungrateful, but in Sysalis, people tend to not get involved in the problems of others. Everyone pushes people in need to the safety department and go on with life. Is it weird that I find it a little unnerving to have people offer to help in such an unrestrained way?
Not at all. I didn't come here under remotely similar circumstances, so I can't say I had quite the same experience as you. But this place does have a unique atmosphere compared to Sysalis. I had a stint in Areli that was a bit of a buffer, I suppose. But I imagine the culture shock has been pretty severe, and that's on top of everything else.
Are you from Sysalis by any chance?
I am. I came here around 12 years ago, but I was born in Sysalis. Was studying law there before I hit the biosynth threshold and lost my citizenship.
The biosynth threshold. So he reached 60% cybernetic augmentation at some point and they revoked his citizenship. How terrible. I was aware things like that happened, but I'd never met anyone that had been forced to leave.
I think it's normal to feel a little lost at first. A lot of us transplants from other domes have gone through that. Especially those of us that had to relocate suddenly. I was luckier than most. My augmentations were medically necessary, so I knew what was coming far in advance. I had time to prepare myself, and I moved to Areli. I wasn't floating around looking for a safe haven like others.
They removed your citizenship even though your cybernetics were medically necessary?
The biosynth band doesn't make exceptions or medical exemptions, unfortunately. Not even for something like SABF. And degenerative diseases don't take laws into consideration when they eat away at your body. I guess it was inevitable those two things would collide.
SABF. I didn't know a lot about the disease. It used to be terminal without extreme intervention, but there was a cure for it now. It was recent, though, within the last 5 or 6 years. If Locke came here 12 years ago, it would have been long before that. That's terrible. Locke let out a strange laugh, followed by a smile that seemed only a little regretful.
If you're here now, I guess you also have experience with how brutal their policies can be. There's just no margin for anyone who doesn't fit the status quo, whether augment or Esper.
It seems that way.
I used to think I'd try to fight it, but standing isn't all you need to fight back. You need money, time, resources, support, health. I was especially lacking that last one. After my last surgery, I was looking at years of recovery. I had to relearn how to use most of my body.
Areli must have seemed like a good place to recover.
They are a little less restrictive when it comes to augments. And then I heard about Nysa. Little rumors here and there. I came to check it out, and I don't know. They were suddenly growing faster than they could handle. Even I could see some of the issues they were starting to have back then. Before I realized it, I was more invested in making this place thrive than going back to Sysalis. Sometimes you build something new and let the fossils run themselves into the ground, I guess. Well, I won't deny that we're lucky we even had the opportunity for that.
It goes like that sometimes, I guess. Just from a history standpoint, sometimes you let Goliath fall on his own.
Anyway, I didn't mean to ramble. I was only trying to say that I can kinda get where you're at mentally about now. I think you'll find that a lot of people here can understand.
Well, Quill had also said that. I didn't know why it just made me sad to think that. I mean, I think it's understandable that there's literally thousands of people here that can empathize with you. Thousands. It's like not an isolated case by any means. It's just like, so many people. I pulled my knees up, surprised at the sudden tears stinging my eyes. I don't know if I should be glad or not. The idea anyone else has had to feel this way. To go through anything even remotely similar. To lose everything. Locke set a hand on my shoulder, and somehow I was surprised at how gentle the gesture was.
You don't have to force yourself to be strong, Morgan. I hope you realize that. You're allowed to cry or scream into a pillow. I hope Quill hasn't inadvertently made you feel otherwise. He's not going to have a problem with any of that.
He'd probably complain about having to change the pillowcases.
That seems accurate.
Quill isn't the problem here. He's been nothing but kind. On the contrary, I'm the one doing nothing but taking advantage of it.
He doesn't view it that way, I can assure you.
I don't want to be someone who just accepts the kindness given to me.
Why not? This isn't New Albion. You don't have to earn kindness on the grounds of merits. It's okay to receive things without having to somehow prove you're worthy of it. At least on occasion. At least for a little while.
All I do lately is complain about how frustrating this is. I should be looking ahead already. Not burying myself and moving things around with my mind so I don't have to think about anything else. Somehow that made him laugh, and harder than I would have expected.
They really do beat it into us that we should just keep our heads down, never complain, and just walk forward without stumbling, don't they? You've been here for a week and a half, Morgan. You're allowed to complain for at least a little while. You're allowed to avoid the heavy decisions and discussions for a bit. Come on. No one just moves on with life after that kind of upheaval. Even if they're fortunate enough to find themselves in a place more receptive to those who don't quite fit into the normal flow of things.
You'd think being shot and chased in the rain would entitle me to some kind of monetary compensation as well. Sysalis really dropped the ball here.
I can see there's a lot about your story Quill didn't tell me.
Well, I haven't told him everything either. I think that's one of the reasons I'm avoiding making a decision about what to do. I know Quill thinks I should stay, but I can't help wondering if staying is the right thing to do. It feels like it comes with a lot of complications, and not just for me personally. There are so many people living here peacefully, and I have some really important groups looking for me. If they find me here, I can't help but wonder what it means for—
Wait. Have you discussed this with Quill yet?
Well, no. Quill and I had a discussion about Nysa and its history. We didn't really discuss much beyond my recovery. I've been thinking about it a lot on my own, though.
Okay. Morgan, look. I'll tell you this myself, then. You're not going to single-handedly bring down the city. We may not be an officially recognized dome, but Nysa isn't powerless to protect its citizens. We have a lot of people who come here while others are looking for them. Surely Quill told you that much.
I don't want to sound self-important, Locke, but none of them are me. Unless there are more Renegade Queen ranks here than I thought. I had people from Delphine chasing me. I had Crimson chasing me. A retrieval bot was tracking me. Not just anyone can afford those. For all I know, it was the Triad government. And Endgame also.
You're not in the Triad anymore, Morgan. And frankly, you shouldn't think about anyone but yourself when you decide what you do. No one in the city needs you to make a sacrifice for them.
It's hard to think like that.
I get it. New Albion is always about contributions and merits and worthiness, and making sure you don't upset the natural order of things. Here in Nysa, we're a very community-focused society too. But while there is give and take so that the community can be stronger, it doesn't mean sacrificing people for the sake of everything else.
That's a nice ideal.
I know reality isn't always ideal, but we do want to build a place where people aren't thrown away because they're viewed as an inconvenience.
It's not like I think it wouldn't be nice to be a part of a community like that. And some of what Quill told me about the research is fascinating. In the end, I still don't know much about the process of staying here. What does it mean for school, work? There are a lot of questions that need answering, and I guess I've been avoiding asking them.
Quill didn't explain any of that to you or get your intake forms done yet?
We haven't talked about it in depth. I mean, the way he came here was so different from how I showed up. I don't even know if he knows for sure what process I need. I was going to ask him to maybe help me contact someone else? Whoever handles this sort of thing?
Morgan, he's on the city's central committee. He knows this stuff.
Ah. Quill is on the central committee?
He hasn't told you that.
All he said was that he had some administrative responsibilities. Beyond that, I thought he was an editor.
He is an editor. Sometimes. But yes, he sits on the committee and has been on it since before I got here.
Wait, so when you say you're a colleague...
A committee member too.
Ah! Dang, alright. No wonder he has such a nice flat. I sat there for a moment, reeling from that information. How in the world did I end up coming to a hidden city to be found by a member of its governing body? Right? That sort of coincidence made no sense. The universe works in mysterious ways.
I want to say I can't believe he didn't tell you that from the start, but then again... He can be frustratingly passive in that regard. Same for things like your intake documentation. He'd probably wait 2 years for you to say you're ready to fill it out and not say a word to you about it until then.
You'd think he'd be eager to get me out of his house and living on my own.
Yeah, don't assume that about him. Quill's very gentle with the people around him.
Ugh.
He's a good person, though. You really lucked out when you ran into him.
I didn't really run into him. More like he brought me home like I was the stray cat.
I can see that. If we had a feral cat population, he'd probably bring them home all the time.
Or his terrace would be overrun with them. Quill would probably not be able to stop himself from feeding them.
I can see Quill doing that.
Can you also see Quill standing 2 meters away, wondering how long the two of you are going to sit there talking about him like he's not there?
I mean, I figured you must have been here for a while. I'm like, this conversation's great, but I feel like he probably has been here for a bit. My entire body jerked when he spoke from near the door, and I only just kept from jumping up with a loud yelp. Quill! When did he get here? Speaking of cats, I swear he was just like one sometimes. This wasn't the first time he sneaked up on me. I didn't even hear the door open when he came in. Locke, on the other hand, barely reacted.
You can always leave again if you don't want to hear it. Then it shouldn't be a problem.
I could.
He shrugged as he stepped into the kitchen, setting a small shopping bag on the bench top.
You're early, by the way.
I know. Had an unexpected opening in my schedule.
He shot me a smile as he stood and joined Quill. I sank back into the chair, willing my heartbeat to return to normal and swearing I was going to buy Quill a bell to wear on his neck. Perfect.
And Morgan, you let some suspicious guy in my flat while you were alone.
He leaned around Locke to give me that usual look of dry disbelief.
I'm hardly suspicious. But she verified who I am before she let me in, don't worry. Though if you had concerns about it, you shouldn't have left her alone without telling her I was coming by.
I didn't think I'd take as long as I did. Got held up by someone at the shop, but you aren't even supposed to be here yet. And sorry I never discussed my job with you in full, Morgan. You've never really asked.
Well, I just assumed. He was right that I never specifically asked about his work. I heard some of his calls, but mostly tried to not eavesdrop. Locke gave me a knowing look as I joined them and leaned on the bench top watching Quill unpack his shopping bag.
When you're ready or you've made your mind up, we can go over the process to get you permanent residency in Nysa so you can figure out what that means for you. Coffee?
Just water. Or tea if you have any.
Oh, I was going to make myself some tea before Locke arrived. I can help if you want. He waved a hand at me dismissively as he started to get cups down from the cabinet.
Anyway, Morgan, if you want more information, just know that everyone who comes here is different and has different needs. Some are granted Aurelian citizenship under different names. Others simply cease to exist outside our independent city systems.
For some, it's a bit of both. But we can go over it all later tonight if you're ready.
Of course. Sorry, I didn't mean to take over the conversation and make it about me. I know the two of you had something else to discuss. I'll head out to the terrace and give you some privacy.
No need. Just sit here. It's too warm out today. I doubt we're going to discuss anything you can't hear.
For me and Locke, Quill pushed 2 cups of steaming tea with the sachets draped over the edge. I watched him pull the usual silver coffee press from the cabinet for himself, glancing over his shoulder at Locke as he prepped his coffee.
So, Locke, what's the news on Sager? I know that's why you're here.
He finally called for a committee vote for the citywide referendum regarding the public declaration of intent to gain official status as part of the Aurelian Dome conglomerate.
I took a long sip of tea, watching Quill's reaction to that over the top of my cup. Official status. So there were people pushing for something like that. That was a surprise. Weren't there some incredibly serious implications for gaining official status with the current population?
Well, we saw it coming. He's been getting more insistent on putting that to a public vote.
We held it off as long as we could, I suppose.
Locke turned to me and gave me an apologetic smile.
Vic Sager is the city manager, Morgan. His role is similar to a premier in New Albion. He's the head of the elected government here. It's obviously a much smaller role given the size of the city. The committee itself is far more organized than it was, but still probably a little less rigid than what you're used to thinking of as city governance. Since you said Quill told you about the city, I'm sure you're aware of Nysa's status.
Yes, he gave me a brief overview.
Right. Well, as you heard, there's a growing faction that would like to change that, headed by Vic Sager. That's what I came by to discuss today. As I mentioned, Quill has been a little preoccupied lately, so he's somewhat out of the loop.
Sorry.
All things considered, I wish I could stay out of the loop and not deal with this kind of annoyance. A bid for public recognition at this time is ridiculous.
Well, that's how you and I feel, but it comes down to which side has more people in agreement. Both on the committee and among the citizens if the referendum passes. What do we do about it?
Shut it down. What else? I suppose if it's come to this, we have to start thinking about the future of this discussion too. But I don't want to open doors that we can't shut later. So for now, we shut it down.
What happens if you can't? If the motion passes, Nysa would petition Aureli for official status?
That's the gist of it.
Would Aureli even be willing to entertain that?
Oh, they'd panic, most likely. At least if we go by our contacts there.
There's a whole knot to untie with regard to publicly recognizing this place. What it would mean for us, what it would mean for Aurelie. It's a big step, one that is undoubtedly going to be necessary in the future. Perhaps even sooner than most of us think. But we aren't even close to being ready for it. No one has a coherent plan for what it will look like, so calling for it now is premature. Sager keeps insisting the support for it is there, but having support doesn't mean the same thing as having the resources to make it work.
If we can stop it at the committee level, it won't matter if he can pull enough votes in the populace. And whether it can do that is up for debate anyway. There are way too many people here who have a reason to not want this.
Assuming he plays fair, of course.
You think he'd cheat? Neither of them answered, which was probably answer enough, wasn't it? What benefits and official status are driving all this?
Well, for one, we'd get funding from the Aurelian government for public services and the like. We'd get representation in its government, which we don't have right now. Stratum would benefit. All businesses would, of course, with greater access to outside funding. The Nysian Research Institute would stand to profit as well.
So it's about the money.
Sager would argue it's about economy and avoiding stagnation. But sure, you can think of it as being money-driven.
Much of the research into array and energy sources, Imidrium, the labyrinth, is groundbreaking. We talked a little about this, if you remember.
But if you're publicly recognized, wouldn't that research be subject to stricter regulations? That would undermine the purpose.
Not necessarily. Remember, Arraean research is so heavily restricted because of the dangers, much of which are mitigated by our neo-human research teams.
In fact, Sager is banking on interest in that research to protect the neo-human population. It's a gamble, but he's confident interest in it would outweigh the desire to regulate it. But Espers are another story. That part of the population is invisible right now due to our reverse nets, but if Endgame really gets wind of how many F-class Espers we have here...
And our loose regulations will go up in smoke if there's a surge of new Espers coming here looking for refuge. With a higher population, we'd expect an increase in crime. And we don't exactly have an Esper police force to manage that.
We have a sort of equilibrium going right now, but that could change in an instant if we become officially recognized. We simply don't have the infrastructure to handle any of this. And jumping straight to a referendum without putting a plan in place is madness.
Which is why we have to shut it down at the committee level.
I've been working to ensure we have the votes, Quill. But you've been on the committee longer than anyone else. You know your voice has a lot of sway.
Oh? He'd been involved in the city's politics for that long? While editing and moonlighting as an author? That was so odd, and somehow felt so very appropriate for this place. Though it did seem like they were dealing with some heavy internal politics these days.
I'll make some calls too if I need to. I really don't think Vic has as much support as he believes he does.
Maybe not. But I worry he won't let it go even if he loses this vote. He seems determined this time. I'll have Vale give you a call too. They had some concerns about a few people in the science and technology subcommittees. Seems like Sager has been getting to a few of them. So it might be good to check in there too.
Sure thing.
The two of them continued to talk for a while about votes and which committee members they thought would vote to which side. It was an interesting front row view into the inner workings of Nysa, and listening to them I kept finding myself surprised to see a new side of Quill. That said, as expected, there was something more oddly casual about the politics in Nysa, like everything else here. It sounded a lot more like listening to business partners discussing a company than anything. Perhaps that was because the city was so small. I imagine there were a lot more normal people on the committee compared to the career politicians like you'd find in New Albion or the rest of the Triad. I wondered how many of them, like Quill, had other jobs as well. Regardless, it was an interesting conversation to sit in on. Locke didn't leave for a long time. and afterwards, Quill and I sat down to discuss what the official relocation process for Nysa looked like. Many people had a modified identity as Aurelian residents with a separate identity as a Nysian citizen. Others only existed within Nysa. Existing in Nysa was more limited, but was sufficient for people who didn't intend to leave or who couldn't leave. I didn't want to limit myself that way, though. So a modified identity, as weird as that seemed, was the plan. The first step would be to start the process of official intake since I had skipped that, then applying for Nysian residency. That would probably take a few weeks, but at least there was a starting point now. Man, she's doing all this citizen resident stuff like way earlier than Lance's route too. How fascinating. And Quill and I had other things to talk about, I learned. Whoa! Your terrace is so pretty too, my goodness. Wait, you contacted her while you were out? Why didn't you tell me?
Because I came home to find Locke in my flat and we have been occupied ever since. Besides, I contacted her gallery only. I didn't want to do it from the apartment as a precaution. I didn't want it tied to your actual location. My message was cryptic, as we discussed. She said she'd get back to me as soon as she spoke to your mother's agent.
I looked up, watching the sky as it slowly shifted darker. So we taken that step as well, contacting home. I only hoped they were able to pick up on the clues in the message and realize it was from me. If Mom and Dad got the message, I expected them to respond quickly, hopefully with as much subterfuge as Quill. It would be a while before we could contact each other normally, I thought. A very long while, if it was ever truly safe again.
Thinking heavy thoughts again.
I sidestepped his question without looking at him. If you drink coffee at this time of day, you won't sleep.
It doesn't really keep me up, or help me wake up. I just like how it tastes.
Same. Stimulants don't work on neo-humans?
Not ones as mild as caffeine. I hope you didn't think that obvious attempt at avoidance would work on me. What has you looking so upset?
I'm not really upset. I'm just thinking about contacting home. And the next steps after residency and fake identities. Even though some of that will take a few weeks, I have to start thinking about other things. Work, a permanent place to stay. It's just a lot.
Quill's like, I said you could stay here. Why don't you want to stay with me?
Poor Quill.
A place to... I thought you already decided to just stay here.
I can't stay here forever.
Even I can't stay here forever, Morgan. We're not exactly discussing eternity. We're discussing as long as you need or want.
I mean, you don't mind my staying? I just thought it was... Most people would see it as temporary, you know?
Isn't it obvious? I'm fine with it. I'd have found a place for you by the third day if I had a problem with you being here.
I curled my toes and hugged my knees tighter, a slight smile coming to my face. I can't always just read into your actions, Quill. Sometimes you are going to have to actually communicate with words.
Then I guess there's nothing to read into anymore. I'm telling you, with words, I don't mind having you as a flatmate. When you get settled and find a job, I can demand rent if it makes you feel more comfortable.
Then I guess I have to find a job.
I know a committee member looking for an assistant, actually. I imagine you'd be a good fit.
Oh? Do you think they'd be willing to hire someone with minimal experience? I was a full-time student, after all. I had a part-time as an office assistant a few years ago, before my class schedule became too heavy. I don't know if that'll be good enough.
I don't mind you having minimal experience, no. As long as you can figure out a basic filing system and hang up on people I don't want to talk to when they call me.
Wait. He smirked at me over the top of his mug. This guy, like, I'll give you a job, give you a place to stay, some clothes. It's fine. You're offering me a job? I like this. You just don't want to bother interviewing anyone else, do you? That's great. It's because you don't want to bother interviewing anyone else, isn't it?
Interviewing people is annoying and a waste of time.
Annoying, yes, but a waste of time. It's generally how you identify someone who's qualified.
Then consider this your interview. Can you do it?
I told you I only have minimal experience.
I don't care about experience, just capability.
I mean, I probably can.
Good enough for me.
I lowered my eyes, chewing the inside of my lip, and here he was helping me again. I couldn't understand it. Why would he go to such lengths for me? I was grateful, but also afraid I might come to depend on him too much. That I might start expecting kindness like this from others. Thank you, Quill, for everything.
Why are you thanking me again? I'm not offering you a job, so you'll thank me.
Then why are you doing it?
Because I need an assistant, obviously, and you want a job. Seems like hiring you solves both problems, especially since things are likely to get hectic soon.
I meant, why do you keep helping me, Quill?
I know that's what you meant.
He was silent for a long enough time I didn't think he'd answer. But finally...
I don't have a specific reason. I just want to. At first because I felt sorry for you and couldn't exactly ignore that you needed help.
You could have sent me to the intake group, right?
I didn't want to. I don't have to have a reason beyond that. I like you. I want to help. That's all. I'm not sacrificing anything to help you.
Your privacy, peace, personal space. He shrugged each of those off as inconsequential.
Like I said, I'm just offering what I can afford to offer. It's not that deep. Stop thanking me for just doing what I want to do.
Fine, fine. I'll be sure to curb my gratitude and admiration of your selflessness then. Curb your gratitude, girl. A slight smirk came to his face as we sat there together in silence a while longer. But for the record, thank you anyway.
You've thanked me 6 times already. At some point it should be enough, right?
If I wasn't capable of being stubborn, I never would have ended up here in the first place. I did hide I was an Esper for most of my life, after all. Then when I was found out, I ran away. Dramatically.
Well, it's not like stubbornness is a terrible quality to have sometimes. Just stop being so stubborn with this bizarre reluctance to accept help. If I ever get tired of helping you, I will just stop.
That's good to know. I think. I couldn't imagine Quill ever not offering to help, though. Despite how gruff he could be at times, it did seem like his nature to offer up everything he had and say it was just because he wanted to. He was a surprisingly kind person. We sat on the terrace for a long time, until long after the sky had gone dark enough only to be lit by the city lights from below. Time was moving ahead and dragging me with it. I was going to be okay. I was really starting to think that.